JIMIN bursts into uncontrollable laughter on a live podcast after Jungkook's shocking wedding confession changes everything. "I'm marrying her," Jungkook said, his voice steady but eyes betraying a flicker of uncertainty. The words hung in the air like an unexpected thunderclap. The live studio fell silent, the faint hum of microphones and the occasional rustle of paper becoming deafening. Across the table, JIMIN's lips twitched, his fingers curling into the hem of his hoodie as though trying to anchor himself. Then, without warning, he exploded pure, unrestrained laughter spilling into the mic, bouncing off the walls, and rushing into the earbuds of millions watching the podcast live. The chat feed on the giant monitor behind them erupted into chaos. A cascade of emojis, frantic question marks, and capitalized demands for answers. But JIMIN wasn't laughing at a joke. It was something sharper, more complex, a laughter threaded with disbelief, tension, and a trace of fear. "Hyung, you..." JIMIN tried to speak, but another wave of laughter overtook him. His head fell onto the desk, shoulders shaking. Jungkook watched silently, jaw tightening. He had expected surprise, maybe even a teasing remark, but not this. Not this public unraveling from the person he trusted most to have his back. The room smelled faintly of coffee, and studio lights burnt dust in the hot air. Behind the camera, the producer gestured frantically for them to keep talking, to ride the wave of virality already brewing online. But the heat in Jungkook's chest wasn't from the spotlight. It was the memory of last night's phone call, the one that made him decide to reveal everything here in front of millions. "Who?" JIMIN finally wheezed out, though his eyes were already glistening not from amusement, but from something he couldn't name. "Jungkook, you can't be serious." Jungkook leaned forward, his voice low but clear enough for the mic to catch every syllable. "I've never been more serious in my life." The tension between them was almost tangible now, a taut string pulled to its breaking point. JIMIN's laughter faded into a quiet, shaky exhale. His mind was running through names, faces, histories. And then, with a sickening certainty, he realized exactly who Jungkook was talking about. For a brief moment, the noise of the studio faded, the fans, the producers, the relentless hum of fame, and there was only the sound of Jungkook's breathing, steady and deliberate. His eyes didn't leave JIMIN's, and in them was something deeper than love or rebellion, something dangerous. JIMIN's pulse hammered in his ears. The man across from him wasn't just announcing a wedding. He was detonating a secret they had buried for years, one that could fracture more than just their friendship. And for the first time in his career, JIMIN wasn't sure if he could keep performing. Not on the podcast, not in the group, not anywhere. JIMIN's chair scraped against the polished studio floor as he leaned back, his knuckles white around the edge of the desk. "You're out of your mind," he said, the words sharp enough to slice through the air between them. His laughter was gone now, replaced by something darker, anger, or maybe fear. The live audience couldn't tell, but the heat in his voice was unmistakable. Jungkook didn't flinch. "You think I don't know what I'm doing?" He shot back, eyes locked on JIMIN's like he was daring him to challenge it. "I've thought about this for months. I've thought about every consequence." The producer's voice crackled faintly in their earpieces, whispering instructions, urging them to steer the conversation somewhere safer. Neither of them listened. The podcast was no longer about the fans or the numbers. It had turned into a live confrontation, raw and unscripted. JIMIN's lips curled into a bitter half-smile. "Every consequence?" he repeated, his tone mocking. "You mean the way this will blow up in your face? The headlines? The fans who will turn on you? The people it will hurt?" He stopped himself, biting down on the rest of the sentence, like it might burn him if he said it out loud. Jungkook caught it. He always did. "Say it," he demanded. "Go on, tell me who you think I'm really hurting." JIMIN's breath hitched. For a moment, the world beyond the studio walls seemed to vanish. The faint hum of the lights, the muffled laughter from the crew, it all dissolved into a ringing silence. He wanted to look away, but Jungkook's gaze was like a trap. "This isn't just about you," JIMIN finally said, his voice dropping so low the microphones barely caught it. "You're tying yourself to someone who..." He stopped again, his throat tightening. He couldn't say her name. Not here, not now. Jungkook's jaw flexed, his voice suddenly softer but no less intense. "She saved me, Hyung. When no one else even noticed, she saw me. I owe her everything." The confession sent a murmur through the small group of staff in the studio. The chat feed behind them was now a storm of disbelief, wild theories, and demands for the truth. Someone on the crew tried signaling to cut to a commercial break, but the camera operator shook his head, eyes wide. This was the kind of viral chaos they couldn't afford to miss. Jimin's hands were trembling under the desk. Memories pressed against the edges of his mind. Nights when they swore certain things would never be spoken. People who would remain shadows in their shared past. He could still hear her laugh, that calculated softness that could make a man feel safe while she slowly dismantled him from the inside. "You don't know what she's capable of," Jimin said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Jungkook leaned in, his face inches from the mic, from Jimin, from the truth. "And you do?" The question hit like a slap. Jimin opened his mouth, then shut it again. His throat was dry. He glanced at the blinking live sign above the camera and realized there was no way to retreat. Every fan watching could see his hesitation, the subtle panic in his eyes. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice steady but cold. "I know exactly what she's capable of. And if you go through with this, she'll destroy you." Jungkook's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted less defiant now, more wounded. "Maybe that's what you're afraid of," he said quietly. "That she'll destroy the version of me you've always known." The studio felt smaller, the air heavier. The tension wasn't just between them anymore, it seeped into the crew, into the audience, watching through their screens, into the fabric of the fandom itself. Every glance, every pause, every flicker of emotion was being dissected in real time by thousands of strangers. And then, without warning, Jungkook smiled. Not the easy, boyish smile fans were used to, but something slow and deliberate, like he had just won an argument no one else understood. "We've already set the date," he said, leaning back in his chair. "And you, Hyung, you're invited?" Jimin froze, his jaw tightening as his mind raced. The words weren't just an announcement, they were a challenge. The cameras kept rolling, the fans kept typing, and somewhere, beyond the glare of the lights, a storm was gathering. The air outside the studio was thick with late-night city heat, the kind that clung to skin and refused to let go. Jungkook stepped out first, pushing past the glass doors with a force that made them rattle in their frames. The neon signs from the cafe across the street cast sharp red and blue streaks across his face, but his expression stayed unreadable. Jimin followed a few seconds later, his footsteps quick, the echo bouncing off the narrow alley behind the building. "Yeah!" he called, his voice sharp and frayed. "We're not done." Jungkook stopped, but didn't turn around. "No," he said quietly. "We were done years ago. You just never admitted it." The words stung more than Jimin wanted to admit. He closed the distance, standing close enough to smell the faint mix of cologne and cigarette smoke clinging to Jungkook's hoodie. "Don't twist this into some old grudge," he snapped. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, and you're dragging all of us into it." Jungkook finally turned, eyes glinting under the streetlight. "You keep saying that, but you never say why. Is it because you're scared for me, or scared of her?" Jimin's pulse spiked. "I'm not scared of her," he lied too quickly. The smirk that crossed Jungkook's face was brief, but it cut deep. "Then you've forgotten what she's capable of." A black car slid up to the curb, its windows tinted so dark it reflected only the neon from across the street. The driver didn't get out, but the back door cracked open slightly. Jungkook's eyes flickered to it, then back to Jimin. "She's waiting," he said simply. Jimin's hand shot out, gripping Jungkook's wrist before he could move. "Don't get in that car." His voice was low now, nearly trembling. "Do you remember the night in Busan? The one we swore we'd never talk about?" The silence stretched between them like a pulled wire. Jungkook didn't answer, but something in his gaze shifted an unspoken memory, heavy and dangerous, passing between them. "That night," Jimin pressed on, "she used you. She used me, and we let her. We told ourselves it was for the group, for the music, for survival, but it wasn't. It was for her. And if you go through with this, she'll own you in ways you can't even imagine." Jungkook's voice was calm, but it carried an edge that made Jimin's skin prickle. "Maybe I want her to." The car door opened wider now, and a soft, unmistakable laugh floated out into the humid night air, a sound that made Jimin's stomach turn. It was the same laugh he'd heard years ago in that dark hotel hallway, the one that had followed him into his dreams and his nightmares. Jimin let go of Jungkook's wrist, like it burned him. "You think you love her," he said, his voice breaking just enough to betray him. "But love isn't supposed to feel like a knife at your throat." Jungkook's eyes softened for a fraction of a second before the mask slid back into place. "You wouldn't understand," he murmured, stepping back toward the car. Jimin wanted to stop him, wanted to scream, to tell him everything, to confess the truth about what really happened in Busan, but the words caught in his throat. He watched as Jungkook slid into the black car, the door closing with a soft, final click. The car pulled away, leaving only the fading glow of its taillights and the echo of her laugh in the alley. Jimin stood there, breathing hard, his hands curled into fists. He knew this wasn't just a bad decision Jungkook was making. It was the beginning of something much darker, something they might not be able to come back from. And for the first time since the group began, Jimin wasn't sure if they'd survive it. Rain hammered against the glass windows of the high-rise apartment, the kind of relentless downpour that made the whole city feel like it was drowning. Jimin stood in the dimly lit kitchen, fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. Eyes fixed on the storm outside. He'd been awake for hours, replaying the scene from last night over and over, every word, every look, every sound of her laugh echoing like a ghost. The front door unlocked with a click. He didn't need to turn around to know it was Jungkook. The sound of wet sneakers squeaking on the hardwood made Jimin's shoulders tense. "You came back," Jimin said without looking at him. "Don't sound so surprised," Jungkook replied, his voice flat but carrying an edge. "You make it sound like I'm some runaway you're trying to reel in." Jimin turned then, eyes scanning him. Jungkook's hair was damp, his black hoodie clinging to his frame, and there was something in his eyes, a storm that matched the one outside. "Where were you?" Jimin asked. The question more accusation than concern. "With her," Jungkook said simply, watching for the reaction. He got it. Jimin's jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the whiskey glass until his knuckles turned white. "You're playing with fire," Jimin said slowly. "And you're dragging me into the flames whether I like it or not." Jungkook stepped closer, voice lowering. "You keep talking like I'm the one starting this. But we both know the fire started years ago in Busan. You were there. You let it happen. You—" "Don't," Jimin cut in sharply, slamming the glass onto the counter. "Don't you dare rewrite what happened that night." Jungkook's mouth twisted into something between a sneer and a smirk. "Rewrite? No, Hyung. I'm remembering it exactly as it was. She didn't just choose me. She chose you too. And you didn't say no." Jimin's pulse roared in his ears. "You think I had a choice?" he said, his voice rising. She knew exactly where to hit. She knew our weaknesses, our secrets. She used them like weapons. And you— his voice cracked, fury and something else guilt bleeding through. "You were too blinded to see it." Jungkook's eyes darkened. "Or maybe I saw it and didn't care." Lightning flashed, casting their faces in stark white for a split second. Jimin could see it now. Jungkook wasn't just defending her. He was protecting something deeper, something that went beyond infatuation or love. It was loyalty, twisted and dangerous. "You're going to destroy everything," Jimin said, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "The group, your career, yourself. And when she's done with you, she'll come for me." "Maybe that's what you deserve," Jungkook shot back. "After what you did." The words hit like a punch. "What I did?" Jimin took a step forward, his chest almost brushing Jungkook's. "You don't get to put this on me. I kept your secret. I kept her secret. I've been cleaning up your mess for years while you kept running back to the person who made it." For the first time, Jungkook looked away, his jaw tightening. "You don't understand her," he muttered. "No," Jimin said, his voice trembling with rage. "I understand her better than you ever will." Thunder cracked outside, rattling the window. The room felt too small, the air too heavy. Jimin wanted to end the conversation, to throw him out, to sever whatever thread still bound them. But before he could, Jungkook pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box, soaked at the edges from the rain. He placed it on the counter between them. "She said you should be the first to see it," Jungkook said, his voice unreadable. Jimin's stomach knotted. Slowly, He flipped open the box. Inside, the ring gleamed under the dim kitchen light, a perfect, polished circle of gold set with a stone that caught the lightning and fractured it into shards of white and blue. It was the same ring Jimin had seen in Busan, the night everything changed. The same one she had once promised him, in a whisper he'd never told anyone about. His breath caught, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The storm outside raged on, but the real one was here, between them, gathering force. Jimin looked up, his eyes locking onto Jungkook's. "You don't know what you've just done," he said softly. Jungkook didn't blink. "Oh, I know exactly what I've done." And for the first time, Jimin believed him. Busan's harbor was alive with the low growl of engines and the hiss of the tide licking the pier. The air was heavy with the salt of the sea and the faint, acrid burn of cigarette smoke drifting from the bar behind them. It had been years since Jimin had let himself think about that night. But standing there now in his mind, he could taste it again. She'd arrived late, as always. The long black coat moved around her like liquid shadow, the sharp click of her heels slicing through the hum of the street. Jungkook's gaze had been locked on her from the moment she appeared. That raw mixture of awe and hunger in his eyes that made Jimin's stomach knot. He'd seen that look before, on other men, and he knew how it ended. "You're late," Jimin had said back then, masking the tightness in his chest with a smirk. She smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of lips that carried the weight of something unspoken. "I like being waited for," she'd said. Her voice was smoke and velvet. Jungkook shifted beside him, younger then, less guarded. "We didn't think you'd come," he said, his tone softer, almost careful. Her gaze slid to him, and in that instant, Jimin knew she had him. "I always come when it matters," she replied, stepping close enough that the scent of her perfume, dark flowers, and danger wrapped around them both. Inside the bar, the music was low, just enough to blur the edges of conversations. She'd led them to the back, where the booths were hidden by heavy curtains. Jimin had taken the seat across from her, Jungkook beside her, his shoulder brushing hers like he couldn't help himself. "I have something for you," she'd said, reaching into her coat. She placed the ring box on the table then, the same one Jimin had opened in his kitchen last night. His breath had caught, even then. "For which one of us?" Jimin had asked, trying to keep his tone light. Her eyes had glimmered with amusement. "Does it matter? You both want the same thing." That was when the night had turned. The drinks kept coming, the room growing warmer, the air thick with things they weren't saying. She spoke in half-truths, weaving stories that made them both lean closer, made them forget to question her. By the time they left the bar, they were following her lead without even realizing it. The hotel was quiet, the carpet swallowing their footsteps. In the elevator, she'd slipped her hand into Jungkook's, her other brushing against Jimin's arm. It was deliberate, a current she knew would spark between them. Jimin could still see the way Jungkook looked at him when the elevator doors closed, half guilty, half daring him to object. He hadn't. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the city lights. What happened there was something Jimin never spoke about, not even in his own head without flinching. She'd blurred the lines between them, pulling them into her orbit until they couldn't tell where she ended and they began. When morning came, she was gone. The ring was left on the table between two empty glasses, its gold catching the weak sunlight. Jungkook had picked it up, holding it like it was a promise. Jimin had said nothing, but inside he'd felt something break. Now, years later, standing in Jungkook's apartment with the same ring between them, Jimin felt that break all over again. The rain outside was steady, relentless. "So this is what it's about," Jimin said quietly, his voice raw. "You think she chose you? You think this ring means she's yours?" Jungkook's eyes were steady, unreadable. "She is mine." "No," Jimin snapped, stepping closer. "She's no one's. She belongs to herself. She uses people, Jungkook. She used me, and now she's using you. And you're letting her." Jungkook's voice dropped, hard as stone. "You think I don't know? I know exactly what she is. I just don't care." Jimin stared at him, searching for some crack, some sign that he could still be pulled back. But there was nothing, just that same dangerous loyalty she had planted in him years ago. "You're going to regret this," Jimin said, his throat tight. "Maybe," Jungkook replied, his hand closing over the ring box. "But I'd rather regret loving her than regret not trying." The storm outside swelled, thunder rolling over the city. Jimin realized then that the night in Busan had never ended for Jungkook. He was still in that room, still under her spell. and there was nothing Jimin could do to break it. The press conference was never supposed to happen like this. Originally, it was meant to be a quiet, tightly controlled fan event, a polished way to present Jungkook's special announcement without inviting chaos. But now the ballroom of the hotel was crammed with flashing cameras, reporters shouting over one another, and a low, simmering buzz in the air that felt more like a riot waiting to happen than a celebration. Jimin stood just behind the velvet rope with the other members of the team, sunglasses hiding his eyes even though they were indoors. He wasn't here to smile or wave. He was here because Jungkook had insisted, had looked him dead in the eye and said, "If you don't come, it'll prove you're scared of her." Then she appeared. The crowd's noise shifted instantly. That collective intake of breath that meant 100 different people had been stunned into silence at once. She stepped onto the platform beside Jungkook with the same unhurried grace she'd had in Busan, the long black dress skimming the floor, her hair falling like dark silk over one shoulder. The curve of her lips was small, polite, but her eyes were scanning the room with quiet precision, as if she were cataloging every reaction, every weakness. "Thank you all for coming," Jungkook began, his voice amplified and steady. "I wanted you to hear this from me, and only from me. I'm getting married." The room erupted. Reporters barked questions. Camera shutters rattled like gunfire. Beside him, she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned toward the microphone, her voice smooth enough to silence the chaos. "And I am honored to become his wife." Jimin felt the words like a blade sliding between his ribs. He knew that tone, that practiced elegance. It was the same voice she had used when she lied to him years ago, when she'd promised she wouldn't come between them. The first question cut through the noise. "When did you two meet?" Jungkook hesitated, not long enough for the public to notice, but long enough for Jimin to catch it. "Years ago," he said finally. "We've been connected ever since." Her hand slid over Jungkook's fingers, curling around his knuckles, and Jimin's stomach twisted. He could see it now. The same subtle performance from Busan, the calculated intimacy, the small touches that made it seem inevitable. A second question. "Is it true you were involved with one of Jungkook's closest friends before this?" That one landed like a grenade. The murmurs rippled through the room. Cameras tilted toward Jimin without anyone having to say his name. She didn't even blink. "The past is the past," she said, her tone warm but final. "And nothing in it can touch what we have now." Jimin felt his jaw tighten. The past is the past. As if it were just a matter of time, not the wound it actually was. When the press conference ended, security ushered Jungkook and her toward the side exit, but Jimin moved first, blocking the narrow hallway. The bodyguards hesitated, glancing at Jungkook, who gave a small nod to let him through. "You're playing a dangerous game," Jimin said, his voice low, his sunglasses hiding the heat in his eyes. Her lips curved into that same maddening smile. "Funny, I thought you liked danger." "I liked honesty," Jimin shot back. "Something you've never had in you." Jungkook stepped between them, his tone sharp. "Young, that's enough." "No," Jimin said, his voice rising. "It's not enough. Because you're blind, and she's enjoying every second of it. And when it's over, when she's done using you, you'll be standing in the same place I was, except you'll have nothing left to crawl back to." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, and Jimin knew he'd struck something, whether it was anger or fear. He couldn't tell. "You talk like you know how this ends," she said softly. "I do," Jimin replied, "because I've already lived it." The three of them stood there, the hum of the distant crowd pressing in from all sides. Then Jungkook's voice cut through, colder than Jimin had ever heard it. "If you can't support us, stay out of it. Stay out of my life." That hurt more than Jimin wanted to admit. He stepped back, his chest heavy. The words caught somewhere between warning and confession. "You're not the only one she's marrying, Jungkook," he said finally. "You're just the one she's doing it in public with." The look Jungkook gave him was pure disbelief, but there was a shadow in it, a doubt he couldn't quite hide. She turned away first, pulling Jungkook with her toward the waiting car. Jimin watched them go, the noise of the crowd swelling again as the door closed behind them. He knew the storm wasn't over, it had only just begun. The suite was silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the steady tick of the ornate clock on the wall. Jimin had been waiting there for over an hour, sitting in a leather chair near the window, staring out at the Black River slicing through the city. He didn't know if Jungkook would show up or if she would come instead. He wasn't sure which one he feared more. The door finally opened without a knock. It was her. She slipped inside like a shadow, closing the door softly behind her. No entourage, no guards, just her. The low lamplight caught the glint of her earrings, and her perfume drifted ahead of her like an announcement. "I thought you'd send him," JIMIN said without turning around. "He doesn't know I'm here," she replied, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "I wanted this to be private." JIMIN laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Private? That's rich coming from you. You make a living turning private things into weapons." She didn't flinch. Instead, she walked past him and poured herself a drink from the minibar. "You're still angry," she said almost lazily. "I thought you'd have let it go by now." "That's your problem," JIMIN said, rising from the chair. "You think time erases what you did. It doesn't. It just makes the scars deeper." She turned, glass in hand, and studied him. "What I did," she repeated, her tone almost mocking. "You were there that night in Busan. You weren't an innocent bystander, JIMIN. You played along. You wanted me just as much as he did." His fists clenched. "Wanting you was the biggest mistake I ever made." "Maybe," she said with a shrug, taking a sip of her drink. "But you didn't stop me. You didn't stop him. And now you want to pretend you were the victim?" JIMIN stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her eyes. "You took two people who trusted each other more than anything, and you ripped them apart for your own amusement." She tilted her head. "Not for amusement, for survival. You have no idea what I was running from." He laughed bitterly. "You're still running, aren't you? You're just using him as your next safe house." Her smile thinned, but she didn't look away. "I care about him." "Care?" JIMIN's voice rose. "Is that what you call it when you pull someone into the same hell you dragged me through?" The door opened again, and this time it was Jungkook. His eyes darted from JIMIN to her, then to the half-empty glass in her hand. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low but edged with suspicion. "She wanted to talk," JIMIN said before she could answer. Jungkook stepped fully inside, closing the door behind him. "About what?" JIMIN turned to him. "About Busan. About what she did. About what she's going to do to you." Her voice cut in, smooth and calm. "He's rewriting history again." Jungkook looked between them, his jaw tightening. "So one of you is lying." JIMIN's chest heaved. "I'm not lying. You remember that night? I remember that you both kept something from me," Jungkook snapped. "You and her. And now you're standing here acting like I should trust either of you." The tension in the room was suffocating. The three of them stood there, locked in a silent standoff, until JIMIN finally spoke again. "I never told you the truth because I thought it would protect you. But maybe you don't want protection. Maybe you want the thrill of being destroyed." "That's enough," Jungkook said sharply, his hand curling into a fist. She stepped between them then, her hand lightly touching Jungkook's arm. "He's jealous," she murmured. "He's always been jealous." JIMIN's eyes burned. "You're not worth jealousy. You're worth exactly what you've always been, a dangerous mistake." Her gaze held his for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. Something Jungkook couldn't see but could feel. Then she smiled faintly, almost sadly, and turned to Jungkook. "Let's go." Jungkook hesitated, his eyes lingering on JIMIN for a beat longer, something like doubt flickering in them. But he followed her to the door. When they were gone, the silence felt heavier than before. JIMIN sank back into the chair by the window, staring at the city lights, wondering if he just watched the last thread between him and Jungkook snap for good. Outside, the river kept moving, black and endless. And somewhere in the night, the storm was still building. The rehearsal room was empty except for the two of them, but the walls felt like they were closing in. It was late past midnight, and the fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a faint, almost menacing persistence. Jungkook stood near the mirrors, his reflection fractured by the streaks of condensation fogging the glass from hours of training. JIMIN was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, watching him like a man trying to decide if the person in front of him was still worth saving. "You've been avoiding me," JIMIN said, his voice low but charged. "I've been busy," Jungkook replied, grabbing his water bottle from the floor without looking at him. "Busy?" JIMIN repeated, almost scoffing. "You mean busy being her shadow?" Jungkook's eyes flicked up, sharp. "Careful." "No," JIMIN said, pushing off the wall. "I'm done being careful. I've been careful for years, Careful about what I say, what I show, who I protect. And what has that gotten me? Watching you walk straight into the same trap I barely escaped from. Jungkook's jaw tightened. You keep talking like you survived some war, but maybe you were just too weak to fight for her. Jimin closed the space between them in 2 strides, his voice cutting through the hum of the lights. Fight for her? She's not a prize to be won, Jungkook. She's a test you can't pass. You think you're the exception. But she's written this story before and you're not the first lead. Jungkook's hands curled into fists. So what? You want me to believe she's some villain in your tragic backstory? That's convenient. She's not just in my story, Jimin snapped. She's in yours. She's in ours. And if you'd stop looking at her like she's the answer to every question you've ever had, you'd see she's the one writing the questions in the first place. Jungkook stepped closer, close enough that Jimin could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead, the hard set of his mouth. You still love her, he said suddenly, accusation heavy in his tone. Jimin blinked, thrown. What? That's what this is, Jungkook continued, his voice rising. This isn't about protecting me. This is about you not being able to stand the fact that she chose me, that she'll marry me, that she'll sleep in my bed and not yours. The heat in Jimin's chest flared into something dangerous. You think this is about jealousy? You think I'd go through all this just because my pride's hurt? He shook his head, almost laughing from disbelief. You're more blinded than I thought. Then explain Busan, Jungkook said, his voice like steel. Explain why you were there, why you stayed, why you didn't stop anything if she was so dangerous. Explain why I woke up the next morning and you couldn't even look me in the eye. The memories slammed into Jimin before he could stop them. The warmth of that hotel room, the sting of betrayal in real time, the way she'd looked at him like she already knew which one of them she would destroy first. His throat felt tight. You wouldn't understand, he said finally. Try me, Jungkook challenged. You want the truth? Jimin's voice broke. Not from weakness, but from the weight of what he'd held back for years. The truth is, she never chose either of us. She chose the chaos. She chose to make us compete, to see how far we'd go for her. And I failed because I realized too late that the only way to win was to walk away. You think you're winning now, but you're just playing the game she's already mastered. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The room seemed to vibrate with the unspoken. Then Jungkook's phone buzzed on the floor. He glanced at the screen, and Jimin saw her name flash in bright letters. You're going to answer that? Jimin asked. Though he already knew the answer, Jungkook picked it up, swiping to answer without looking away from him. Hey, he said into the phone, his voice softening instantly. Yeah, I'll be there in 10. He ended the call and grabbed his bag. This conversation's over. No, Jimin said quietly, watching him head for the door. This conversation hasn't even started. Jungkook paused for half a second at the doorway, but he didn't turn around. Then he was gone, leaving Jimin alone with the hum of the lights and the reflection of himself in the mirror, a man staring at the cracks in something he'd once believed was unbreakable. Outside the building, rain had started again, tapping against the windows like a warning no one was listening to. And Jimin knew with cold certainty that the next time they faced each other, it wouldn't just be words between them. The dressing room smelled of hairspray and faint perfume, the kind that lingered long after the person wearing it had left. Jimin stood by the vanity, staring into the mirror at his own reflection. But he wasn't looking at himself. He was replaying every word from last night in the rehearsal room, each sentence still vibrating in his chest, like an echo that refused to die. The door burst open without warning. Jungkook stepped in first, his eyes stormy, followed by her calm, poised, the very picture of control. She closed the door behind them, and for a moment, all three simply stood there, the silence thick enough to choke on. We need to talk, Jungkook said, his voice tight. Jimin turned slowly, his arms folding over his chest. That's funny. Last night you said the conversation was over. It's over when I say it is, Jungkook snapped, stepping closer. You've been talking behind my back, she told me. Jimin's gaze shifted to her. She didn't flinch, didn't look away, but there was the faintest curve at the corner of her lips. Of course she did, he said quietly, because that's what she does, feeds you half the story so you'll come running to finish it with your fists. That's not true, Jungkook said, but there was hesitation in his voice, and Jimin caught it instantly. "You really can't see it, can you?" Jimin's tone sharpened. "She's making you choose between her and me, and she's smiling while you do it because that's how she wins." Her voice slid into the air like silk. "I'm not making him do anything. He's choosing me because he wants to. Because he loves me." Jimin took a step toward her. The distance between them charged like static. "Love? Is that what you call what you do? You don't love. You recruit. You collect people until they're too tangled in your web to escape. You did it to me, and now you're doing it to him. That's enough," Jungkook said, his voice rising. "You don't get to talk to her like that." Jimin's eyes locked on his. "And what if I do? What if I'm the only one who ever will? Because when this all comes crashing down, I'm the one who will still be here picking up the pieces of what's left of you." The tension snapped. Jungkook's hand shot out, grabbing Jimin by the collar and shoving him back against the wall. The vanity lights reflected off the anger in his eyes, making them burn brighter. "You think I need saving?" Jungkook growled. "I'm not you, Hyung. I'm not weak. I can handle her." Jimin's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "That's exactly what I thought too." Jungkook's grip faltered for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Jimin pushed him back, breaking the contact, his breathing sharp in the heavy air. "You don't even know the whole truth about Busan," Jimin said. "You think you do, but you only know the part she let you see. You don't know what she told me after you fell asleep. You don't know what deal she made using both our names." Jungkook froze, confusion flashing in his expression. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of something dangerous crossing her face. "Jimin," she said warningly, "don't." But Jimin ignored her. "She didn't just want you that night. She wanted leverage. She wanted both of us tied to her so tightly we couldn't move without dragging the other down. And you," his voice broke, a mix of rage and regret, "you were too deep in to see she'd already signed your name next to mine on the same chain." Jungkook turned to her, searching her face for denial, but she only smiled faintly, as if daring him to believe it. "Tell him," Jimin demanded. "Tell him what you told me when the sun came up in Busan." Her eyes met Jimin's, and for the first time, her smile slipped. "I told you the truth," she said slowly, "that I'd never have to choose between you, because I could have you both in different ways." The air in the room thickened. Jungkook stepped back, his face pale under the harsh lights, but his voice was still stubborn. "You're twisting it." "No," Jimin said softly. "She is. She always has." For a long moment, no one moved. Then she stepped toward Jungkook, her hand finding his.
"You know me,"
she said gently.
"Don't let him poison what we have."
Jungkook hesitated. His eyes flicked to Jimin, then back to her, torn between two versions of the same story. Jimin could see it, the fracture forming in him, the doubt she couldn't quite cover anymore. And he knew this was only the beginning of the break. The knock at the door came suddenly, sharp and urgent. A manager's voice called from the other side. "We're live in 2 minutes." She smoothed her dress. Jungkook straightened his jacket, and Jimin stayed where he was, leaning against the wall, watching them walk out together. He didn't follow. Not yet. Because when the truth finally tore them apart, he wanted to be the one standing at the center of the wreckage, ready to show Jungkook exactly who had been pulling the strings all along. The stage lights were blinding, washing the entire arena in a golden haze. The roar of the fans was deafening, a tidal wave of voices calling Jungkook's name over and over. Jimin stood just off stage, his earpiece in, microphone cold in his hand, but his focus was fixed on the two figures at center stage. Jungkook was smiling, radiant under the spotlights, and she was standing beside him, poised, perfect, like she belonged there more than anyone else. The cameras were everywhere. Every smile, every glance, every brush of her hand against Jungkook's arm was being broadcast to millions. It was more than a concert now. It was a declaration. Jimin knew exactly what she was doing, staking her claim, making sure the world saw her as the one person who could stand in that spotlight with him. Backstage, the manager's voice crackled in Jimin's earpiece. "You're up next for the duet." He froze. The duet wasn't supposed to include her, but as the opening chords played, she didn't step back. Instead, she took the mic from the stand, her fingers brushing against Jungkook's. He didn't stop her. Jimin stepped onto the stage, the blinding light swallowing him. The crowd screamed louder, sensing the tension before he even opened his mouth. He sang his part, every word loaded, every note sharp with the weight of unspoken history. She sang back not to him, but to Jungkook, her voice syrup smooth, the lyrics twisting into something intimate. Halfway through the song, she moved closer to Jungkook, resting her hand on his shoulder as they sang into the same microphone. The crowd went wild. Jimin's stomach twisted. When the song ended, the applause was a thunderstorm, but the air between the three of them was ice. They walked off stage together, and as soon as they were out of the fans' view, Jimin grabbed Jungkook's arm. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. Jungkook shook him off. "It's called a performance, Young." "That wasn't a performance," Jimin shot back. "That was you letting her rewrite the narrative in front of millions. You're giving her exactly what she wants." Her voice slipped in before Jungkook could answer. "And what do I want, Jimin?" He turned on her, his eyes cold. "You want control. Over him, over me, over the story people tell about us. And you're willing to burn everything down to get it." She smiled faintly, almost pitying. "If that's true, then you've already lost. Because the moment you start fighting me in public, the audience will choose sides. And trust me, they won't choose you." Jungkook stepped between them, his frustration boiling over. "I'm sick of this. You two need to stop tearing each other apart." "She started this," Jimin said. "No," she countered, her eyes never leaving Jimin's. "We both did. In Busan." The name hung in the air like a loaded gun. Jungkook's gaze snapped to her. "What about Busan?" Jimin's chest tightened. "Don't," he warned her, but she didn't hesitate. "Tell him, Jimin. Or should I?" He said nothing, and her smile widened. "You didn't just let it happen that night. You came to me first, before him. You wanted me to choose you. That's not..." Jimin started, but she cut him off. "You kissed me before he even knew I was in the city. And then you pretended to be surprised when you found us together. You made me the villain in a story you helped write." Jungkook's face was unreadable, but his silence was louder than any accusation. "That's a lie," Jimin said firmly, but even to his own ears, the words sounded strained. "Is it?" she asked, tilting her head. "Or do you just wish it was?" Jungkook stepped back from both of them, his gaze darting between their faces like he was trying to see the truth in the spaces between their words. "I don't know who to believe anymore," he said finally, his voice low. "You believe me," she said softly, stepping toward him. "No," Jimin cut in, his voice raw. "You believe what you've always known about me. That I'd never hurt you like this. That I've spent years protecting you, even when it cost me everything." The tension was a living thing now, pressing against all three of them. Jungkook's breathing was shallow, his hands curling at his sides. Finally, he turned to Jimin. "If what you're saying is true, then prove it. Tell me everything about Busan, right now." Jimin hesitated, the weight of the choice heavy on his chest. He knew that if he told the full truth, it would destroy her hold on Jungkook, but it might also destroy Jungkook's trust in him forever. Before he could answer, the stage director shouted for the next set. Jungkook turned away, walking toward the light without looking back. She followed, glancing over her shoulder with a smile that said she knew she'd won this round. Jimin stayed behind, his pulse pounding, his throat tight. The noise from the stage swelled, but all he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat, and the question burning in his mind, whether the truth would save Jungkook or finally push him over the edge. The rain had started again, heavier than before, hammering against the glass walls of the hotel's rooftop lounge. The city below was a smear of neon lights, blurred by the downpour. Jimin stood near the edge, one hand gripping the railing as if it was the only thing keeping him grounded. He'd asked Jungkook to meet him here alone, but when the elevator doors slid open, she stepped out beside him. Jungkook's expression was already tight, his jaw set like stone. "You said this was urgent," he said, brushing past Jimin toward the center of the room. "It is," Jimin replied, ignoring her presence. "I'm done letting this fester. Tonight, you get the truth about Busan." Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached, her voice smooth as ever. "Careful, Jimin. Truth can be such a fragile thing in the wrong hands." Jimin turned sharply. "And lies are your specialty, aren't they?" Jungkook's voice cut in, sharp. "Enough. Just tell me what happened." The words caught in Jimin's throat for a moment, not because he didn't know them, but because saying them aloud meant there would be no way back. "The night in Busan," he began, his eyes locked on Jungkook's. "You weren't supposed to meet her first. I was. She called me that afternoon. Said she wanted to see me alone. I went to the bar, thinking I'd finally get closure. Instead, she started talking about you, about how you trusted me more than anyone, and how that trust could be used. That's not how it happened, she interrupted, her voice calm, but her eyes sharp. Jimin ignored her. She told me she wanted us both there that night, that it would be exciting, dangerous. She was already planning to make us compete, to turn us against each other. And his voice cracked. I should have walked away, but I didn't, because I thought I could control it. I thought I could keep you from getting hurt. Jungkook's face was unreadable, but his fists were clenched at his sides. So you went along with it? I went along with it because I thought I could win, Jimin admitted, shame curling in his gut. And that's my sin. I played her game, even for a moment. But I stopped. You didn't. Her laugh was soft, almost pitying. Stopped? Is that what you call it when you kissed me in that elevator before he arrived? When you whispered you'd do anything to keep me from choosing him? That's a lie, Jimin snapped, the words sharp enough to cut the air. Is it? She asked, stepping closer to Jungkook. Or is it easier for you to paint me as the manipulator so you can live with yourself? Jungkook's gaze swung between them, his eyes dark. You've both lied to me. That's the only thing I'm sure of. Jimin's voice broke through the tension. I never lied about why I stayed quiet. I wanted to protect the group. Protect you. Because I knew if this ever came out, it wouldn't just ruin us, it would ruin everything we built together. And what about me? Jungkook demanded. Did you ever think maybe I had the right to decide for myself? Jimin stepped forward, his voice raw. If I had told you back then, you would have run straight into her arms faster. You were already halfway gone. The rain outside grew louder, drumming against the glass like a heartbeat. She reached for Jungkook's hand, and for a moment, he let her take it. But then he pulled back. The first real sign of hesitation Jimin had seen in weeks. I need space, Jungkook said finally, his voice low. From both of you. Her eyes flashed, but she masked it quickly. You're making a mistake. No, he said, stepping toward the elevator. The mistake was letting this go on for so long. He left without looking back. The elevator doors closed, leaving Jimin and her alone in the echoing silence of the lounge. She didn't speak at first, just studied him with that inscrutable smile. You think you've won, she said eventually. But he'll come back to me. They always do. Jimin took a step closer, his voice steady. Not this time, because now he knows what you are. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. And what about what you are, Jimin? Do you think he'll forgive you when he realizes you were just as complicit? The words lingered long after she walked away, her perfume trailing behind like smoke. Jimin turned back to the rain-streaked glass, watching the city blur beneath him, and wondered if she was right, if the truth had come too late to save any of them. The night was cold enough to sting the skin, but Jungkook didn't seem to notice as he stood alone at the riverside. The Han reflected the city lights in broken, shivering fragments, the water dark and restless. He'd been here for hours, hood pulled low, hands buried in his pockets, replaying every word from that rooftop. Jimin's voice, her voice, they were tangled now, impossible to separate. Footsteps approached from behind. He didn't have to turn to know it was Jimin. The older man stopped a few feet away, breath visible in the cold air. You didn't answer my calls, Jimin said. Jungkook kept his eyes on the water. Didn't feel like talking. That's never stopped you before, Jimin replied, stepping closer. You came here to think, so think out loud. Tell me where your head's at. Jungkook finally turned to face him, his expression hard but tired. I'm starting to wonder if you're any different from her. Jimin stiffened. That's not fair. Isn't it? Jungkook challenged. You both kept things from me. You both decided what I should know, what I shouldn't. You say you were protecting me, but maybe you were protecting yourself. Jimin's jaw tightened. I'm not her, Jungkook. I never played you. I never wanted to own you. But you wanted to win. Jungkook shot back. You admitted it yourself. You thought you could win that night in Busan. You thought she was some kind of prize, and you only stopped because you lost. That's not true, Jimin said, his voice sharp. I stopped because I saw what it was doing to us. Because I realized she didn't care who she hurt as long as she got what she wanted. Jungkook looked away, his breath fogging in the air. And maybe what she wants is me. Jimin stepped closer, his voice urgent. Then what happens when she doesn't want you anymore? What happens when she finds the next person to pull into her game? Before Jungkook could answer, another voice cut through the cold. I think I can speak for myself. She emerged from the shadows of the path. Her coat pulled tight around her, hair swept up against the wind. Her eyes glinted in the dim streetlight, unreadable but sharp. You followed me, Jungkook said. Not quite a question. Of course I did, she replied smoothly. You disappear after a night like that? I needed to make sure you were okay, Jimin scoffed. You mean you needed to make sure he still believes you? Her gaze flicked to him. And you're here to do the same thing. Funny how alike we are, isn't it? I'm nothing like you, Jimin said. She stepped closer to Jungkook, ignoring him. You've heard our stories. Now you have to decide which one you believe. But remember, belief isn't always about the truth. Sometimes it's about who's willing to fight harder for you. Jungkook's eyes moved between them, the weight of the choice pressing down like the winter air. What if I don't believe either of you? He asked quietly. Then you believe yourself, she said gently, reaching for his hand. Jimin caught the movement. Don't, he said sharply. Don't touch him like you own him. Her smile was slow, dangerous. Ownership is about choice, Jimin. And he's standing here, isn't he? With me. That's because you've been feeding him half-truths for years, Jimin snapped. You've built this entire relationship on the foundation of what you didn't tell him. And you didn't? She countered, her tone like ice. You kept Busan from him just as much as I did. The only difference is, I'm not pretending to be his savior. The silence that followed was brutal. Jungkook's gaze dropped to the ground, his knuckles whitening in his pockets. Finally, he spoke without looking at either of them. I need both of you to leave me alone. I can't figure this out with you breathing down my neck. Jimin's chest tightened. Jungkook, I said leave, he repeated sharper this time. She didn't argue. She stepped back into the shadows, her heels clicking against the wet pavement until the sound faded into the night. Jimin hesitated longer, his eyes locked on Jungkook's profile. But he knew pushing now would only make things worse. He turned and walked away, each step heavy, the cold biting deeper with every breath. When Jungkook was finally alone again, he looked out at the dark water. His reflection rippled with the current, fractured and shifting, just like the truth he was trying to hold on to. He didn't know whose story was real anymore. All he knew was that the choice he made next would change everything, and there would be no undoing it. The practice hall was empty, except for the sound of Jungkook's sneakers scraping the polished floor as he moved through choreography on autopilot. He wasn't practicing for any show, he was just trying to move until the thoughts in his head stopped circling like vultures. The mirrored walls reflected him back 100 times, each version looking a little more tired than the last. The door slammed open, the sound bouncing off the walls. Jimin stood there, his chest rising and falling like he'd run the whole way. His eyes were sharp, almost fevered. We're talking, now. Jungkook didn't stop dancing. I told you I needed space. You've had space, Jimin shot back, walking inside and closing the door behind him. All it's done is give her more time to get inside your head. Jungkook turned toward him, sweat dripping from his hairline. You're obsessed. You talk about her like she's some monster in a fairy tale. Maybe you're just pissed because she chose me. Is that what you think this is? Jimin's voice rose. A competition? Because if it was, then congratulations, you win. But it's not a prize you're going to want when you find out what it costs. Jungkook tossed his towel onto the floor. Then tell me what it costs. Stop with the vague warnings and just say it. Jimin hesitated, his hands curling into fists. She's not here for love. She's here for leverage. She knows things about both of us that could end everything we've worked for, and she's not afraid to use them. You mean she knows about Busan? Jungkook said, his voice flat. Jimin's eyes darkened. She told you? She didn't have to. I put it together, Jungkook replied. I'm not stupid, Jimin. I know there's more to that night than either of you have said. But here's the thing. I don't care. It's in the past. I'm looking forward. You can't look forward if you're chained to her, Jimin snapped. She's the kind of person who will burn your future just to light her way. Before Jungkook could respond, the door opened again. She stepped inside, her expression calm but her eyes glittering. Am I interrupting? Yes, Jimin said instantly. No, Jungkook said at the same time. She smiled faintly at the contradiction. Good. Then I'll stay. She crossed the room, her heels clicking against the floor, and stopped between them. You're both exhausting yourselves over something that doesn't need to be this hard. You have different versions of me in your heads, and neither of them is real. Jimin barked a laugh. And what's the real you then? The one who doesn't play games, she said evenly. The one who wants what she wants and isn't afraid to go after it. She turned to Jungkook. You know me. You've seen me when the cameras aren't around. Do you really think I'm the person he says I am? Jungkook's jaw worked silently for a moment, torn between them. I think you're both lying to me in different ways, he said finally. Her gaze slid back to Jimin. And which of us do you think will stop lying first? I already have, Jimin said. He just doesn't want to hear it. She stepped closer to Jungkook, lowering her voice so Jimin had to strain to catch it. You know what I've never done? I've never walked away from you. Can he say the same? Jimin's teeth clenched. I walked away because staying would have destroyed both of us. You're staying because you want to destroy him. That's your version, she said lightly. And you've been repeating it for so long you've convinced yourself it's truth. Jungkook held up a hand. Enough. I can't keep doing this. If you two want to keep tearing each other apart, do it without me. He grabbed his bag and headed for the door. She called after him, her voice soft but cutting. Remember, I've always been the one who tells you the truth even when it hurts. Jimin followed, his voice sharp. And I've been the one keeping her from destroying you, even when you hated me for it. Jungkook stopped in the doorway, his back to both of them. Maybe I don't want either of you protecting me anymore. Then he walked out, leaving the sound of the door slamming behind him. For a moment, Jimin and she just stared at each other in the echoing room. Her smile returned, slow and deliberate. He'll come back, she said. Jimin stepped closer, his voice low. If he does, I'll be there to pull him back out again. And this time, I won't stop until you're gone. Her eyes glinted with something that was almost amusement. We'll see, Jimin, we'll see. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken threats, the kind that didn't need to be said out loud to be understood. And somewhere down the hallway, Jungkook kept walking, not realizing he'd just left both of them more determined than ever to win.